Good morning, happy Thursday. We are today in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. We were in Mark 10 for Tuesday and Wednesday. Today it's 1 Corinthians chapter 10. I'm going to read the first dozen or so verses. For I do not want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters, that our fathers were all under the cloud and all passed through the sea, and all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and all ate the same spiritual food and all drank the same spiritual drink. For they drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ. Nevertheless, with most of them God was not pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. Now, these things that took place as examples for us, that we might not desire evil as they did. Do not be idolaters, as some of them were, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. We must not indulge in sexual immorality, as some of them did, and 23,000 fell in a single day. We must not put Christ to the test, as some of them did, and were destroyed by serpents, nor grumble, as some of them did, and were destroyed by the destroyer. Now these things happened to them as an example, but they were written down for our instruction, on whom the end of all ages has come. Therefore let anyone who thinks that he stands take heed, lest he fall. No temptation has overcome you, that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with temptation he will also provide the way of escape, that you may be able to endure it. So there's a genre of literature I realized I had started reading without even realizing that it was a genre. But I was drawn to it, and that is literature written, books and articles written by former pastors. Former successful pastors, at least successful as defined by popular media. These are men some of whom have been my acquaintances, who pastored leading churches or ministries, or who had written lots of books, or supposedly were quote unquote successful Christians. In every case, the ones I'm referring to, they said the right thing. I'm not thinking about people who I sometimes also met and thought, oh no, they're off track. And I would try and pray for these people and sometimes reach out and say, my friend, I think you're headed down the wrong path, and I don't think you're being well coached about how you're living your life and some things that you're thinking and doing. I'm not talking about those. I wasn't surprised when those people got in trouble. I'm talking about people who surprised me. And this literature, this genre of literature, reminds me of sailing magazine I used to read. I don't sail anymore, but when I did, I used to read this first-person accounts of accidents that had happened. And it was always told, I was sailing, I was, a mile off the coast, and I was under a 20-knot wind, and I had my mainsail up, and I had this a spinnaker out, and da-da-da, and this was happening, and it was low tide, or whatever. It just describes all these events, and then things start to go wrong, and what they did in response. And I would read these every time the magazine came out, because often I would do everything wrong. Like, okay, I'm tracking with your story. You did this. This happened. You did this. This happened. You did this. And I was always hoping I was going to be able to spot the mistake much earlier than I generally tended to. So these are stories of people that have fallen. Again, some of them, their falls made national news. You might be aware of it. Look, I have written a little bit about this, complained about lax boards, allowing them to get in positions. I expect sinners to sin. I'm not shocked by that. I'm frustrated when the boards are supposed to be close enough to see this and sort of correct it. I've noted that character and competency often don't line up. Some people are 10 talent competencies, but they're like 2 talent characters. And so you see some of those problems coming. I just want to share one of the observations, because I've seen this playing out now in a couple different accounts that I've read. There's a variety of different ways we could sort of divide people up. We could talk about those who repented and those who haven't. We've talked about the fact that those who end well and those who don't. The Bible doesn't suggest many of us end well, by the way, if we're just looking at biblical characters and how they end. David doesn't end well. Solomon doesn't end well. You know, Abraham, not so much. David certainly doesn't end well. But the thing that I have heard from a couple of these people that really jumped out and got my attention, and I just shared as a devotional thought today. It sounds depressing, but it doesn't have to be. And that is, they said something like this: I knew I was bad. I just didn't realize how bad I was. Right? I knew I was a sinner. I knew I was broken. I knew that I was subject to temptation, whether this is sexual temptation or embezzlement or whatever it is. I knew I was broken. I just didn't realize how deep the sin in me ran. So I want to encourage you to be aware of how deep the sin in you runs. And this, again, this can sound depressing, but not when we lean into the gospel. Not when we realize God's grace and mercy is bigger than our sin, and God's word is a light into our path. And so be encouraged by the provision God makes, but be aware of how weak we are to temptation. Have a good day.